A very good morning to you and welcome to the show. This is New Day, Saturday edition. My name is Abna Tebi. We're live on TV3 here in Accra. We're also live on 3FM 92.7 and we're streaming live around the world online on 3news.com, also on our Facebook page, TV3 Ghana. We're running from now till 9:50 where we bring conversations to a close. We encourage you to send through your messages, contributions, your remarks on the topics that I will be outlining very soon to our WhatsApp number 050-0607-070. We encourage you to be a part of the show. We'll be happy to share your messages with the rest of the world. What's coming up on the show this morning? We'll start off with issues in Parliament. The Speaker is expected to be sworn in as President later today. The second time this week, as the President travels in the absence of the Vice President, who is currently on medical leave in the UK. Now, arguments over the constitutional provision that mandates this to be done has come up, with a number of questions being asked as to whether or not it's necessary, even in the light or against the backdrop of a Supreme Court decision that has interpreted the constitutional provision regarding the swearing in of the Speaker of Parliament as President when the need arises. We'll be looking at this critical issue that has come up this week for discussions as we move on to consolidate our democracy in Ghana. Also up for discussion this morning is the Gitmo 2 detainees, now turned refugees. Now, the President, at his second Meet the Press encounter last week, when asked about what is going to be done with the Gitmo 2 ex-detainees, had this to say, and I'm quoting, "The Gitmo detainees, the period is up and a decision has to be made. We need to be able to say something to Parliament when it resumes, because the period of the agreement has come to an end." Then, upon the resumption of Parliament from their recess, the Foreign Minister had news not just for the members of Parliament, but indeed for the entire nation. And the news was that the Gitmo ex-detainees acquired refugee status during the term of the previous administration. And according to her, the refugee status tied the hands of the government, and so the Gitmo 2 pretty much have come to stay. Question is, did the Gitmo 2 really have 2 years to stay in Ghana under the agreement between Ghana and the US, as was stated by the former government and alluded to by the President Nana Dankwa Akufo-Addo at the recent Meet the Press encounter? And is it really the case that the 2 Gitmo ex-detainees cannot be returned because of their refugee status? Well, I can say on authority that the agreement anticipated a stay in Ghana beyond 2 years. In fact, they were to be integrated into the Ghanaian society, and that the 2-year term talked about was only in respect of the period within which they were to be put under security surveillance. They were therefore not here for 2 years right from the get-go. So why the communication to Ghanaians that they were here for 2 years? That being the agreement, which was subsequently ratified by Parliament, should there be any controversy over the grant of refugee status to the 2? After all, the grant of refugee status is just one of a number of ways that the 2 could have been integrated into the Ghanaian society. In other words, that's how they could become legally, resident in Ghana. Another question agitating my mind is, does the grant of the refugee status to the 2 Gitmo ex-detainees disable Ghana, a sovereign state, from returning them to wherever they came from? These are some of the issues we'll be looking at in respect of this particular topic. Also up for discussion is the Vice President's health status. Question is, how much detail should the public know? The Vice President of the Republic, according to a press release or a statement issued by the Presidency, left Ghana in the late hours of Friday, the 19th of January 2018, on a medical leave to the UK upon advice by his doctors. Now, following this release, there have been speculations about the ailment that the Vice President is suffering from, which had necessitated his medical leave to the UK. Now, some members of the minority NDC are calling for full disclosure of the details of Dr. Bawumia's health. The majority, on the other hand, is describing this request or demand for full disclosure as perhaps rather hypocritical. Is this a circus we are experiencing or what? Because we do recall that not too long ago, some members of the majority, then in the minority, demanded full disclosure of the health status of former President Mills of blessed memory. Today, the majority, back then in the minority, describes such calls as hypocritical. Perhaps the majority may have a point, because the minority, back then majority, also had issues when the minority back then demanded full disclosure of the health status of the late Professor Mills. Now they are the apostles of full disclosure. The political class may have their reasons for, keeping these matters out of the public's eye, but the citizenry are demanding answers. But the question is, to what extent should the public be in the know of the medical or health status of our political leaders, given the confidential nature of such matters? Also up for discussion is the ongoing standoff between the University of Ghana authorities and the University and the government of Ghana in respect of the University of Ghana Teaching Hospital. The question is, who takes control over the management of the University of Ghana Teaching Hospital? That seems to be the lingering question on many minds in Ghana at the moment. Now, the tussle over the control of the $217 million health facility has led to the facility lying idle since the facility's first phase was completed and expected to have become fully operational in July 2017, a situation that continues to deprive Ghanaians access to quality health care. We will be looking at this rather disturbing situation as we go on in the show. I'll pause for this point at the moment. When we come back, we will introduce the panelists for today's conversations, and the conversations will begin. You're watching and listening to New Day, Saturday edition. We'll be right back. Also on our Facebook page, TV3 Ghana. We'll be starting off our conversations, but we need to take a listen to what happened in Parliament regarding the impending or imminent swearing in of the Speaker of Parliament, the second time this week as the President of the Republic, given that the Vice President is currently out on a medical leave in the United Kingdom.
The President, in a communication to Parliament, served notice of a trip to Ethiopia to participate in the 30th Ordinary Session of the Assembly of Heads of State and Government of the African Union, and then to South Africa to attend the funeral of Hugh Masekela. The Majority Leader, Osei Mensah, told the House of the scheduled meeting on Saturday for the swearing-in ceremony. This will be the second time in a week the Speaker is being sworn in as President. Last Sunday, Professor Michael Quay took the oath of office of the President in an emergency sitting in Parliament when the President travelled to Liberia to attend George Weah's inauguration as President in the absence of the Vice President, who was on a medical leave. Some minority members described as needless the swearing-in of the Speaker anytime the President and Vice President are out of the jurisdiction of Ghana.
I don't think this is sustainable. So it's entirely the responsibility of the government of the day to come clear and come clean so that we can understand the conditions that would warrant us to make the kinds of sacrifices that we are expected to make. As it is now, a lot of us don't feel that it is justified to always call us at the neck of time, as it is today, for us to come in tomorrow and swear in the Speaker as the acting President. It is not good for good governance.
The Majority Leader, however, maintains it is a constitutional requirement.
It's a whenever clause. What's the meaning of whenever? Any time, for as long as it happens. Unfortunately, if you look closely at 8 says whenever the president is absent from Ghana or is for any other reason unable to perform his functions. What it means is that if the president is absent from Ghana, it should be construed that he's unable to perform his functions. And that is where, as a nation, maybe we should come together to see whether we will be able to live with this. Because within 1 week, we happen to swear in the Speaker as president, and then we're swearing him in the second time.
But do you then agree with people who think that that clause should be reviewed?
We should. There are many areas in the Constitution where, as a nation, we have to have a second look at. And I agree that we should holistically review the Constitution.
A former Speaker of Parliament, Edward Doajaho, was said to have violated the Constitution when he refused to take the oath of office as president for the second time in the absence of then both president and his vice from Ghana in November 2014, arguing he had taken the oath earlier. The chief executive of Accra-based City FM, Samuel Atamensa, and US-based Ghanaian lawyer Professor Stephen Kweku-Asare petitioned the Supreme Court for interpretation of Article 60, 11 and 12. A 9-member Supreme Court panel chaired by Justice Sophia Kufu ruled that the Speaker is obliged to take the oath of office as President whenever both the President and his vice are out of the jurisdiction. The swearing in, according to the highest court of the land, is not a mere formality, but to remind the Speaker that while he ordinarily is the head of the legislature, he has additional responsibilities as President.
Good. Welcome back. So quickly, I'll introduce the panel and we'll dig straight into the topics lined up for conversation. I'll start from my left. We have Mr. Abraham Amaliba. He is a private legal practitioner, also a member of the NDC legal team, as well as the NDC communications team. Next is Dr. Ahmed Jinapo. He is a senior lecturer at the University of Education, Winneba. And we have also Nana Fridia Ajimang Oforiata. He is the second vice chairperson of the NPP in the Eastern region. Good morning, gentlemen, and welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's
good to have you here. So we just had that story regarding the swearing in of the speaker in situations where the vice president and the president are out of the jurisdiction, and that's a constitutional provision. In the story, indeed, we're told that the Supreme Court has, interpreted Article 60:11 and Article 60:12. So pretty much the issue is settled. Mr. Maliba, start us off with this. I mean, the issues being raised are to some extent legitimate, but we seem to have, this constitutional provision, which, if we want amended, would require a certain procedure. Until then, unfortunately, this is pretty much what we have.
Yeah, so let me start by saying good morning to your viewers and to my fellow panelists. You see, the parliamentarians are worried because of the frequency with which they are asked to come back to Parliament to do this ritual. It's a ritual, Now, as you rightly indicated, this has been settled by the Supreme Court. So long as both president and vice president are out of the jurisdiction, so will it be that the speaker will be sworn in. So they should brace themselves. But you see, this was not envisaged by the framers of the Constitution. And what do I mean by this? The framers of the Constitution did not envisage that there will be a situation where both president and vice president will not be able to perform their function or be out of the jurisdiction.
But we have that provision in the 60:11.
Yeah, I'm coming. No, I'm talking about the frequency. They are worried about the number of times they will be coming back to be doing this. And it's going to happen. In fact, when the president returns from Ethiopia or wherever and decides to go to Togo tomorrow, they will have to swear the speaker in.
But currently, this is the second time it's happening.
Yes.
So the frequency.
Now we have a peculiar situation where our vice president is on medical leave. You see, normally before it will come to the speaker to be sworn in, the vice president will not be available. And hardly do you have a situation where both president and vice president are out for parliament to be recalled. And so the situation we have here is because of the medical illness of our vice president. If the vice president were around, they won't be called back. We've not seen that several times where the vice president is there and both have left the country. And so the situation has to do with the vice president's absence from Ghana. Now, but when you look at the provision, and I agree with some people that when you look at 6011, it says that if the president and the vice president are unable, so let's ask ourselves, would we say that the president is unable to perform his function while he's away? You see, the provision for the vice president...
You are now looking at the interpretation given to it.
Exactly. Because when you look at how the vice president assumes office, it is when he's out of the country. But in the provision that deals with the speaker, it is when the statement there or the language there is unable. To perform. Now we need to interrogate that. If the president leaves this country, is he unable to administer this country in this age of technology? So one may want to say that, look, the provision that allows the vice president to act when the president is out is different from that of the speaker. And so one will want to go back to court and interrogate that one and say that a different interpretation should be given to the speaker's own, where we would want to say that even if the president is out, he is still able to perform. But that has also been settled, because the Supreme Court indicated that the premise of the Constitution envisaged that at all times there should be somebody sitting in that Flagstaff House acting as president. So these are the issues. But I can understand the frustration of the parliamentarians. But I'm afraid they will have to continue to come, because that's the constitutional provision until as it is. But we are being faced with this because of the absence of the vice president. If the vice president were around, it would be difficult for us to have both of them. It happens, but it's rare for both of them to be out of the jurisdiction. For which reason they will now be calling on the speaker and the parliamentarians to come. They are just complaining because of the frequency. Right. But I'm afraid they will have to continue doing that. Quickly,
before I move to the other panelists, on that issue, you know, there's the requirement that the president, when being sworn in, should be sworn in before Parliament. Now, having to recall parliamentarians into Parliament for this to be done, there are those who are also arguing that perhaps, yes, we could look at a situation where we don't necessarily need to do it before Parliament, so that if such a situation arises, perhaps we could do it in the Flagstaff House. Then you don't have the need to recall parliamentarians.
The president is sworn before Parliament. The reason why this is done is because Parliament is a representative of the people. Indeed, they are supposed to be sworn before all of us. But because all of us cannot congregate into one space, we allow the swearing-in to take place before our parliamentarians. But this parliament has even found wisdom to say that, look, why not do it at the Independence Square, where, in fact, the Ghanaian people can be part of it. So to swear the speaker in camera will not be a true reflection of what the framers of the Constitution intended, that the swearing-in must be done, because the power belongs to the people, and the people must be part of it and be seen to be giving the power to you. But, and that's why it should be...
But perhaps, just to push it a little more, perhaps this is also coming against the backdrop of the exigencies of the time, which would necessitate certain, you know, if you like, reforms. You're talking about 21st century means of communication and all, necessitating that we perhaps have a relook at the interpretation given to whether or not a president is able to perform his or her duties when outside Ghana. And also, it's really something worth considering, isn't it?
Probably you are teasing some of these things out, but I know that what this issue that you raise would meet as a resistance will be what I have just said, that the power belongs to the people. Sovereignty lies in the people, and the people must be seen also handing it over to you, and that's why it should be before our parliamentarians.
Very well. Okay, let me move to Dr. Ahmed Jinapo quickly. But before that, let me quickly introduce the fourth and final panelist for today, who is Mr. Martin Pebu. He is a private legal practitioner. Welcome, Counsel. It's good to have you here. Great. So, Dr. Jinapo, I'm throwing this question to you. Your perspectives on this, the swearing in, the frequency of Mr. Maliba is talking about the frequency. We do have a situation where this is the second time that it's going to happen. So in terms of frequency, we may not necessarily have, you know, a back and forth situation where we can say, yes, we've done this overly too much. And so we begin to fret. But perhaps we're looking at it in a forward-looking manner where we are saying, what if we should have, you know, a higher frequency? Then indeed it would become a toll, or it would indeed be a toll on parliamentarians who would have to, you know, come back to Parliament anytime the need arises.
Well, let me say good morning to your cherished viewers and listeners. I think, first of all, regarding this particular issue, this is not the first time that there's been a debate relative to whether this thing should be done that way or not, because if you look at the commentary that your TV station provided, at a point in time, Honorable Doajo did say he was not going to take a second oath, and it happened to go to the Supreme Court, and there was an interpretation. So as it stands now is the law. You can't do anything about it. The only thing that you can do is probably to amend that section of the Constitution through whatever procedure that we need to go through. But I think it also needs to be looked at within the spectrum of one, not necessarily parliamentarians being called back. Parliamentarians are complaining because they were on holidays. If it was a normal session, the first time that they came, because they were on recess and they were called. Today, as we speak, Saturday, they are not supposed to be at work. So naturally, it's going to affect. If it was a normal day, I don't think anybody would have complained. But when I listened to my good friend, Dr. Apak, complain that this is not sustainable, something needs to be done about it. The question that I asked, this is not the first time that this happened. It happened under the presidency of President Mahama, where he happened to be an advisor to the president. What was his suggestion? Did he suggest that something needs to be done about it? Ashanti always say, today, because you are in opposition, of course, it's a legitimate complaint. I don't have a problem with that. We are looking at even the effect on Parliament. Have you looked at the cost? The cost to the state? Because any time that the speaker is going to be sworn in, the chief justice has to be there, all kinds of security arrangements. I mean, parliamentarians, have we looked at the cost? So I think we need to look at it from an objective stand. And if I remember, when the NDC was in power, then people used to complain about it. But today, what are they saying? They seem not to have any problem with it. So I think, I mean, laws are made for human beings, not human beings for laws. If we seriously think that this thing needs to be looked at, then we have to take a decision. The unfortunate aspect about most of our complaints is Ghanaians complain about issues when there's a problem. For instance, if had it not been because the vice president and the president are both not around, and it's been consistent, I mean, twice in a week, nobody would have complained. But if we really genuinely had a problem with it, we would have sat down and even take an action prior to this happening. So I think, I mean, both sides of the political aisle will have to sit down and take a decision. I'm told the minority wants to go to the Supreme Court for an interpretation. I don't know what kind of interpretation they are going to seek for, because, as I said, this thing has already been ruled on. Parliament has the authority in enacting and amending laws. If it's a law that is not entrenched, that can be amended. I think the right thing needs to be done.
But this is entrenched, so
it's entrenched, and we really think that, look, it's becoming a burden on us, especially in a technological era where, in fact, I mean, if we are talking of the Speaker of Parliament performing additional functions as the President, what is he doing? Apart from being called the acting president. Does he appoint? Does he, I mean, does he issue letters with the title acting president, or if he signs a letter, he signs as the Speaker of Parliament? I think we need to look at these issues and take a decision. This back and forth and political accusations here and there, I don't think is the best way to go.
Very well. Then we move to Nana. Quickly, your take on this issue. Complaints coming in, legitimate to some extent, but also the current situation, necessitating this arrangement is where we obviously have the Vice President who is on medical leave, and we are not sure, how long that is. And assuming the President has some travel plans, it means then again we would have to have the Parliament, or the Speaker being sworn in again. And the question about the frequency of it would perhaps rear its head again.
Well, my first issue would be if you wouldn't mind reading that portion of the Constitution for us to contextualize it, because I think that's the basis.
Yes, I think, okay, let me just read that. That's 6011, where it says, where the President and the Vice President are both unable to perform the functions of the President, the Speaker of Parliament shall perform those functions until the President or the Vice President is able to perform those functions, or a new President assumes office, as the case may be. And then 12 specifically talks about the Speaker in relation to this, that the Speaker shall, before commencing to perform the functions of the President under Clause 11 of this article, take and subscribe the oath set out in relation to the office of the President. So the swearing in is done pursuant to 60, 11 and 12.
Yeah. Now, I took a cue from, I requested that because I took a cue from Mr. Maliba's proposal, or his presentation, where he said, he referred to the Constitution. I'd never really taken time to look at it. But if it talks about unable, then it raises the question, and then maybe a little bit more clarity on what exactly the Supreme Court was thinking when it emphasized or affirmed the fact that this process must be, we must go through it. Because if you are unable, that means you are not able. And what does not able mean? And in fact, in the instance of not able, as I understand it, and I humbly submit, I'm not a lawyer, when you're not able, it means you're probably mentally unsound, physically unfit, and therefore can't. That's my understanding of not being able, being unable. If that's the case, then how does this fit into the picture? It cannot be the frequency. It cannot be. If it was the frequency, in the first instance of the Honorable Duajao, the Right Honorable Duajao, refusing, that would be an argument for frequency. He was tired by the second time he was being sworn in. The politics of that one, Mr. Amaleba should explain. Consistency is important. It cannot be about the frequency. And therefore, you also raise questions about Dr. Park's submission. What was that? And that it is the government. The government is the one that is enforcing, has put the clause into the Constitution. Was it the government of the time of Mr. Duajao? I mean, we must take Ghanaians a little bit more serious than that. It cannot be about the frequency. It's about the issue of the interpretation of the Constitution, and would want the legal people to deal with that. I'm one of those people who complains. I find it preposterous, ridiculous, and all that to have us go through this all the time. When you raise the question about when you have to go to Togo, the president goes to Togo, the vice president goes to Benin, and then we have to, and then they come back the next day and have to go to the opposite sides, and then we have to do. I mean, it gets preposterous. Now, what's the real thinking behind that particular clause? If it isn't what I think or what I'm proposing it is, and if it is what the judges say it is, which is that the minute the president crosses the border, the minute the vice president at the same time also crosses the border, we need to have somebody here who's sworn in.
But at all material times, there is that person who wields executive power in the seat of parliament, in the seat of government.
Immediately, first thing is, when the president crosses and he goes with all our security and receives all of the diplomatic whatever proceedings, whatever that shows that this is the president of Ghana. What is the other president? What's President Ukwe doing here? We have two presidents at the same time. It just doesn't ring well. Now, for me, I'm asking, does it have anything to do with our past? Is why the framers of the 92 Constitution, framing it in 1990, 91, 1999.
The process earlier than
that. Yeah. What was the thinking? The fear of another coup? because that could be the basis. You know, at all points in time. And when you look at those other coups, what's the truth about them? Dr. Nkrumah was not in town. He didn't have a vice president. Dr. Buzia was not in town. But there was a sitting president, honorary as it were. So, in the case of Dr.
Liman had a vice.
Yeah, well, even let's go to General Achampo. He was in Ghana. In the case of General Akufu, he was in Ghana. Dr. Liman was in Ghana. So what's the real thinking? I mean, what is it? What is that insecurity that I perceive this to be a matter of insecurity? If I am right on that particular argument, then there's something insecure about that action. Not so much the provision, because I'm arguing that if unable means health or incapacity, physical incapacity, then that provision is just and fit. If it's just about matter of crossing the border, then it's not.
But that's a current interpretation, that
exactly.
being outside
and so then
constitutes inability
it needs to be looked at. It needs. So for me, I'm on the side of those who think that this action should be looked at again. And Mr. Maliba proposes that maybe somebody should go to court. I wouldn't mind being your client, Abraham, if you take it to court so that we can raise the question again. I mean, honestly, this would be something that would be worth looking at.
Very well, thank you. Let me go to Mr. Martin Kwigu here. Clearly, I mean, you've heard the speakers, I mean, earlier views here, and of course we had the
Abraham,
parliamentarians.
I hope you wouldn't charge me if I became a client.
Also, you do it for free. Also, you know, speak to this issue. And there are those who are proposing, yes, let's go back to the Supreme Court, have them, you know, take a look at it again and see whether they'll depart from their earlier positions or what. What do you think is the way to go? Obviously, this is an entrenched provision that if we seek to amend, we need to go for a referendum. And currently, the constitutional review process that we started years back is stalled for all sorts of reasons. Now, how do we deal with this? Because obviously, the conversation or the talk coming out is that, yes, we need to do something about it, given the exigencies of the time, the modes of communication in 21st century, and all other matters considered.
Okay, so I should start off by saying that perhaps this incident is good riddance for the work done by the Constitutional Review Commission, so that we can revisit the work and put pressure to see about implementing the proposals and the recommendations that were made, so that in the specific circumstances of the entrenched provisions, we should have a referendum. So it's good riddance. You know, that's how life is. Because, you know, the Review Commission did a good job, fantastic. They interviewed Ghanaians and then came out with proposals and recommendations. The government issued a white paper. Yes, there was a court action in the Supreme Court that kind of scuttled everything. But the action was eventually thrown out, you see. So it's probably the right time to go back and see about a referendum to amend some parts of this constitution. I'm saying so because, you see, I've looked at Asari and AGA again. That was in 2003, 2004. And then Samuel Atamense's case, 2015. In both cases, the court has made it clear that, look, once the president and the vice are out of the country, the speaker will have to be sworn in. Most specifically, the Samuel Atamensa case, that's the 2015 one. The court even, I was just looking at it, I mean, a few minutes ago, the court looked at it and said, look, 6012 is clear to them. That's Article 6012 is clear that each time the speaker needs to exercise assume the office of the president, he must subscribe to the oaths. For them, they said, and it was a unanimous decision that 6012 doesn't give them any difficult interpretational issues.
Straightforward.
Exactly. So from this, I think I'll join the chorus that perhaps we should look for a referendum. We should pursue that path. You see, and the court has made it clear. You see, they are not happy to just legislate anyhow. The Supreme Court, yes, you know, we've been there a number of times, so sometimes they will tell you clearly that, look, don't think that you must always come to this court for an interpretation. Indirectly, what they're telling is that, look, there are other avenues. So in this case, as I've said, thankfully, we even have the report of the Constitutional Review Commission. You see, yes. So arguments such as in the 21st century, while the president is out there, he can communicate. Yes, they were addressed. These arguments were even canvassed in the 2003 case. The Asari,
yeah.
yes, that there is email, there is telephone, and those submissions were canvassed in 2003, and the Supreme Court looked at it and said, no, when we look at the text, when the meaning is very clear, you don't do violence to it by, replacing your own intentions. So 2003, 2004, then you come to 2015, almost a little over 10 years, a decade. The Supreme Court looks at the case and still says that, look, when the number 1 and number 2 are out, the speaker must be sworn in. Even
with the advancement of technology over that decade.
Exactly, because for the Supreme Court, it says that if you look at it, the intendment of the framers was that once these 2 are out, there must be a president within the jurisdiction. Yes, so the Supreme Court has not shied away from the fact that it means that at some times we have 2 presidents, one outside, exercising the powers extraterritorially, right, and then one within the jurisdiction. And then on the matter of the speaker not being sworn in each time, the court said, look, if you don't swear in the speaker each time, then you are left with an absurd situation that when the president is in the council, so let's say if the speaker is sworn in the first time, when the president and the vice are out, and we take the position that he doesn't need to be sworn in the next time they are out, then it means that you would have constituted the speaker as an alternative president. So he's an alternate president. They say, no.
Lurking in the shadows.
Exactly. So like the way we have shadow directors. So he said, no, we don't want an alternate president. He is not an alternate president. He can only assume that office when the president and the vice are out. So bottom line is that to the extent that the court is being very clear in its thinking, I don't subscribe to the suggestion that somebody should go back there again. No, rather, let's look at a political solution. And as I've stated earlier, even when the president assumed office, President Kufuor, he promised that DCs will be elected. Right. We will require a referendum for that. So that's why I stated earlier that we should add these other questions so that we do one referendum and then we can move forward. But
how feasible is that, moving forward with this referendum? Because we do know the issues that have brought this whole process to a halt. Aside the matter that was pending before the Supreme Court, which was dealt with, there are issues about the numbers involved, the number of provisions to be amended. How do you narrow those issues down into a yes or no question for the people to go to the polls and just opt yes or no? It's quite cumbersome. So it's not as straightforward as we would want it to seem, given the volume of amendments on the books.
Yes, I agree with you that it's not as straightforward, but it must be done. It's interesting. You remember, you were at the faculty too. I remember Professor Kumado those days. He told us that at the time where they were undertaking the referendum to approve the Constitution, you know how many copies of the Constitution were in circulation? They were not even up to 5,000. Yet millions of Ghanaians went and voted that we want the Constitution. So people voted when they hadn't even cited the Constitution. I'm not saying that is justification for saying that, we can go ahead and do this referendum anyhow. But what I'm saying is that at least we've dealt with a bigger question before. So for me, if you look at the fact that the referendum was held when there were less than 5,000
in circulation,
this latter problem pales in the shadows of the earlier one. So let's start. That's why NCC exists. Let's fund NCC to, when they roll out the program, then they will educate the populace. When you gather experts, there's a way they can narrow down. Certainly, as we usually say, where there is a will,
there's always a way.
Exactly.
Very well. I think you want to say something, yes, Nana? Quickly.
Short, quick debate, if you will. On the matter of the fact that the Supreme Court has spoken. Now, when you look at the 12, what is the basis for the 12? The basis for the 12 is 11. Is that not the case? And what is 11 saying? It says unable. The question is, what does unable mean? In the Constitution, anywhere they have defined unable in other terms, with other words, it typically has to do with health, has to do with death, it has to do with crime. In these instances of crossing the border by the president or vice president, whichever period you want to look at, which of these unables has applied such that this is the case? And I'm asking whether we've asked the Supreme Court that.
Yes, that was the question.
Several times.
And, and their answer was that unable in this instance means that they can't be president while they've crossed the border.
Yes.
So then, I mean, you see,
reserve judgment. Please reserve judgment. They've looked at it thoroughly.
No, the thing is, we're here to understand ourselves and educate everybody. So don't worry about nobody's going to insult.
Yes, but the thing is,
so there is the understanding and appreciation of the position.
And we have the benefit of the two cases that Mr. Kwebu mentioned, Asari and Attorney General, way back in 2003, 2004, right. And then several years down the lane, the position remains the same. So that should tell us something that, I mean, and again, that was why when he was speaking, I interjected that even with the advancement of technology, now we have WhatsApp, we have Skype, we have so many things. Even with those, the Supreme Court stuck to, the original interpretation, which is that being out of the jurisdiction constitutes inability to perform. So what we have left then is to...
You mentioned the issue of Kwame Nkrumah whilst he was away and then they could... Yes, it's also part of the...
In all the instances I assigned, there were only two. In matters of being absent. Only two instances.
But ultimately, essentially, I mean, looking for... We need to do something.
Yes,
clearly, there is that consensus. No two ways about that. There is that consensus. How do we get it done?
I want to... The other one was the matter of the Speaker's oath. Of president, you're saying that they argued that he sworn an oath, and it would be ridiculous for him to have to be holding on to that oath when.
No, that if, like what happened recently when the president went to Liberia, he came back, and now there's the need for the speaker to be sworn in again. I mean, it's become, you see, within the short period, we've had to do that. And the question I think that Mr. Kwebu was addressing was, why, do we need to have him sworn in again? And the thing is, you can't have him pretty much rely, if you like, on the first one, because it would create a situation where...
That is the basis for my question, which is, so the vice president, what oath did he swear, such that he doesn't swear an oath when the president is absent? And how come that oath applies, but that oath, in the case of the speaker, it cannot apply? You understand my point?
Let him address it and then I go to
It's because the vice is, let's say, in ordinary English, assistant to the president. So when he swears is sufficient. But the speaker is the head of the legislature. That's another arm of government. So you see that even in collaterally, it helps in the separation of powers. That when he crosses to come and assume this office, each time he should swear.
Perform a ritual.
Yes. So as I've said, from my experience in the Supreme Court, this one, let's push for a referendum. It's better.
I can't wait for a speaker to...
Dr. Jaffa wants to come in, and then I will come to you, Mr. Maliba. Yes, quickly, Doc.
I think the reason why, as I did indicate before, this issue is become an issue for discussion is because of where we are today. We have the president and the vice president out of our jurisdiction. Any time that we have the vice president around and the president is leaving, nobody complains about it. So when even you take a look at even Dua Jahu's time, the 4 years that President Mahama was in office, how many times did we have anything of this sort? So I think we need to be a little bit cautious, not to more or less jump to the conclusion that as a country we've come to the consensus that this needs to be amended through a referendum. At least the framers of the Constitution in their mind made it clear that, look, with the president, we have a vice president. The only problem that we have a challenge is when these things happens. I mean, it happens most of the time. So how do we prevent it? And I think we'll be discussing the absence of the vice president and all those things.
Later on in the
so I think we need to be very cautious in jumping to the conclusion that, look, this thing needs to be removed, because there can be other alternatives. Even in the United States, the president and the vice president are not around. The Speaker of Parliament takes the oath. It's very clear. So if it is possible for the oath to be taken, even not before Parliament, what is wrong with that?
Which is the issue that was raised earlier, but Mr. Maliba, explained that yes,
agreed.
It manifests the presence of the people and all of that.
It's understood, but if we are talking of technology, if Oaf is taking at the Flagstaff House and the people are watching on television,
it goes back to it. Yes, quickly, yes, Mr. Maliba.
That same technology argument was shut down by the Supreme Court. You see, when you look at 6011 very well, and I'm trying to tease out the challenges, it says, among other things, that the Speaker of Parliament shall perform those functions until the President and the Vice is able to perform. Let me just stop here. So can the Speaker do a reshuffle?
I mean, if he has to.
So, in truth,
Peter Legit tried doing
in truth and in fact, can the Speaker, without recourse to the President out there, do reshuffles? So sometimes we put ourselves we box ourselves in a difficult situation. Because for me, I just think that, look.
But you see, please hold on to that and let me just expand this some more. You see, the unable there pretty much could come in the situation where the President, the Vice are both really not well.
Yes.
And so, yes. And so, you wouldn't even need to consult a person who at that point is unwell or perhaps of unsound mind, for which reason he's even not, in the position. So then you would need to take that decision.
They said unable to perform the functions. Then he will be sworn in. He has been sworn in. Can he then perform the functions? That's the question.
And that's what I'm saying.
Yes, so I'm saying that in truth and in fact, do you think that the Speaker, as he's going to be sworn in this morning, without recourse, because he's now President, to the big man.
Acting President.
Exactly.
Acting President, without recourse to the big man, can he go about doing changes and reshuffling? It's
per the Constitution, he can.
Would he do it? Can he do
that is speculation, and I don't want to go into the realm of speculation.
I think that this acting role is simply to hold the fort, but don't take any major decisions. That would be a tsunami, which would bring about political tensions.
But that wasn't part of the Supreme Court's interpretation, was it?
Yes, I'm saying that. I'm not talking about Supreme Court. I'm saying that what actually is the case is that this man will only be holding the fort and wait for the big man to return. But he cannot do any major decisions.
That's according to Mr. Maliba's interpretation. But otherwise, so you're saying practically those things cannot happen. So eventually, or ultimately,
who was nominated by the other side,
or ultimately,
made Speaker,
and that would totally be bizarre. But anyways, let me just take some messages that have come in respect of this matter. This one is saying, I'm now. Okay, this is asking, will Nana seek re-election 2020? If so, what? Okay, no. The swearing in of the Speaker twice in the same week is a clear indication that the Supreme Court's ruling lacks its purposiveness. The ruling is problematic and cannot simply stand the test of time. The Supreme Court must review that archaic and unrealistic interpretation that Alhaj Suleiman in Asawase constituency. Says the NDC as a party will never speak the truth. What prevents them from telling Ghanaians they had given that, okay, you're looking at the gate move, we'll come back to that. But quickly on this, good morning to you all. I wish our Vice President a speedy recovery. Okay, I don't expect the minority to have any qualms with the stay of Gitmo 2. Okay, so these people are geared up on the Gitmo 2 conversation. We'll be going very, very soon to talk about that one. But to wrap up on this, the swearing in of the Speaker in the absence of the Vice President and the President himself. Your last words quickly, Mr. Martin Pebu, and then we take a break.
Yes, so on the last one, I want to join Dr. Jinapo on his proposal that perhaps the swearing in, what we should, you see, when we say amendment, it may not be to say he shouldn't swear the oath, but it can be sworn not before Parliament, so that we can find other innovations. if I understood Doc well, because yesterday, I mean, somebody asked me a similar question on one of the other stations. I said, yes, perhaps, let's see. If, let's say, the speaker is in Boku, maybe he's attending to some things and the president has to go, he shouldn't rush from Boku to Accra, because it may even lead to an accident or that. So he can be sworn in there. We can do this video conferencing, so that once all the people in Ghana have the opportunity to view, it's as good as appearing before Parliament.
Or that if Parliament is on recess, you don't need to call all of them there. You go to some Flagstaff House, have some representatives there, and that's it.
That is it, exactly.
But then others would argue too that if you're using communication, advanced telecommunication for this purpose, then you might as well resort to those communications for the president to perform his function even whilst outside the borders of Ghana.
The reason we wouldn't use that one is that the Supreme Court is speaking
clearly on that.
Yes.
Very well. We'll take a break, and when we come back, we move straight into the Gitmo 2 detainees, now turned Gitmo refugees. We'll be back shortly. Welcome back. You're watching and listening to New Day Saturday edition. We're live on TV3, also live on 3FM 92.7, and we're live online around the world on 3news.com, also on our Facebook page, TV3 Ghana. We'll be moving on next to look at the Gitmo 2 refugees situation, which this development came in this week, and we're looking specifically at the Minister of Foreign Affairs, who informed the nation that the Gitmo 2 there was no exit plan, as it were, and that government hands are tied by virtue of the fact that the two were granted refugee status under the former administration, and so we are here to stay. They are here to stay. We have two, fine gentlemen joining us as a nation, and matters arising thereof we're going to be looking at. I will start with Mr. Maliba, because this, if we go back, we do know where this is coming from. In 2016, this is, the story first broke, and the government at the time told Ghanaians that the Gitmo 2 were here for a period of 2 years. Indeed, President Akufo-Addo also at the recent Meet the Press encounter also alluded to that when he said, yes, the period for their stay is up, and so we need to go to Parliament to tell them something and all of that. But looking critically at the agreement, and I have, as it were, intercepted a copy of the agreement, and I've gone through it, and looking critically at it, you do notice that the original idea was not for them to be here for 2 years. They were to be integrated into the Ghanaian society. That's the bottom line. Integrated into the Ghanaian society. So, and that the 2 years that that we heard of really had to do with the period within which they were to be put under security surveillance. So the question then is, why that communication to Ghanaians that they were here for 2 years? Perhaps that will start us off, with this conversation. I want to understand that. Indeed, Ghanaians want to understand that, because I think that is one of the shockers that came out this week, that really, there was no exit plan, that kind of situation. Why that communication to us? Have you had a chance to look at the agreement, by the way?
Yes. Now, let me start by saying, let me answer this very question before I go to what I'm going to say. If you said you saw the agreement, you must have seen in that agreement that after the 2 years, there will be renegotiation or they are sent back home. There will be renegotiation with the Americans. So that would have been a separate agreement. I don't know the version you have seen, but I'm saying that in that agreement, in fact, they are diplomatic notes. They are not like proper agreement. They are diplomatic notes.
Well, it constitutes an agreement between the two states.
So what I'm saying is that in that agreement, or those correspondences, it was that after the 2 years, there will be renegotiation, or they will be returned to their country of origin. Now, the previous administration
But that really is not what is in the agreement.
Well, the agreement that Dr. Dominic Ayine sent to the Supreme Court in camera had those provisions.
Which was subsequently sent to Parliament for ratification.
Now, you asked a question. Let me now talk about what I think about this. The previous administration viewed the diplomatic notes, and for that matter, the agreement between the US government and the Ghanaian government as classified information. The Mahama administration. It was classified information. Now, when we talk about classified information, there is what is called confidentiality involved in that. So, matters regarding Ben Atef and then the other guy, the other guy, Al-Dubi, were clothed in confidentiality. And that is why even when the Supreme Court ordered the Deputy Attorney General, Dr. Dominic Ayine, to file the document, he resisted. And it ended up being that they will go in camera and then have those things looked at. And
then subsequently, the Supreme Court ruled that there was nothing in that agreement that was of, posed any threat to national security, for which reason it should be treated as such. So, bottom line, that agreement having been treated as confidential or whatsoever, to the extent that, yes, it was, at the point of negotiation, yes, it had to, but beyond that, it's really not a confidential bit.
We still stand, and now, at the end of the day, I will challenge the administration, this administration, dare them to do something if they think that there's nothing at all. See.
To do what?
To make public certain things. If they think that, in fact, anything regarding Gitmo 2 should be made public, I will dare them to also make certain things public. When I get there. Now, you see, when the government then decided that, because it's a related matter, when the government then decided that it was going to give them refugee status, the government still saw all those things as confidential. And so if you ask the question, why were Ghanaians not informed? These are all clothed in confidentiality,
but classified to the extent that even you're saying something, but I need to come in. I do appreciate. Don't think I'm trying to gag you or anything. I can't do that. But to the extent that the former president, did come out and communicate to us that they were here for 2 years, at least there was some disclosure. The question then is why was that disclosure not exactly, the truth, in the sense that disclosing exactly what the agreement said?
I'm not going to be distracted. I've answered that question initially.
You haven't.
I'm saying that
I asked the question and I determine whether or not you've answered it. I don't think you've answered it.
I've told you what was in the agreement, and I've told you that under the agreement there is what is called renegotiation or transfer back to your home country.
Well, now, I will read that.
Now, the point is this. Every related matter regarding the Gitmo 2 is perceived to be confidential. And so there was no way that the government of the time was going to be coming back to the people and telling them that this is what we are doing about this, the two Gitmo 2, the Gitmo 2, because it was confidential. And the point now is that with what is happening now, the MPP is saying that because we gave them, the government is saying that because we gave them the refugee status, we've tied their hands. It's neither here nor there.
That would be looked into critically at the, like on the show.
Another stage.
Yes, at another stage. Yes. So, I wanted you to look at the disclosure. But
so on this matter of why didn't we disclose? It was
the real content.
It was because of the classified nature and confidential nature of the agreement. Now, if you go to the State Secrets Act, and as a lawyer you should know there's a law like that. If you go to the State Secrets Act, that law provides that if you divulge information which is of a confidential nature, there are penalties for you. And so all those officers from the National Security, Interior Ministry, to the Deputy Attorney General and his superior were guided by all this, including the Foreign Affairs Minister, that because of the classified nature of the information, and because of the confidentiality, and because of the State Secrets Act, which prohibits public officials to divulge information of this nature, they were not going to be the people who put out these things in the public domain. Some people have asked that, why is it that it was not included in the handing over notes?
We'll get to that, but still, I think you should wrap up on this. I need to move
now,
to Mr. Pebu.
If we'll come back to that.
Yes, we'll come back to that.
My dare to the MPP is this. If they think that there's nothing to hide or to keep as a secret on this Tigitmo 2 people, I dare them to show Ghanaians where these people live in Ghana. They should show us the houses.
Very well.
Because that one too, Ghanaians must know.
Very well, thank you.
The people are in this country. So if they think that things relating to them is not secret and Ghanaians should know about it, my dare to them is that show in which house, house number what? Is it at Cantonments or is it in Boku? Show Ghanaians where these people live. And there I will say that it is true that the MPP think that that is a matter for the Ghanaian people to consume.
Very well. Mr. Pebu, quickly on this. Mr. Maliba is talking about the confidentialities of it, the fact that, you know, they couldn't divulge certain information because it was, you know, confidential in nature. No. But during the course of the case in the Supreme Court, when the two Ghanaian citizens sought interpretation or declaration from the Supreme Court that the act of the president by not, you know, having had Parliament approve the agreement or ratified same was unconstitutional, that case. The Supreme Court ruled at the point when the agreement was, you know, brought before them in camera, that yes, this is not of a confidential nature that, you know, so it should be made, you know, available
to the council.
Exactly, to the council. So that ruling supersedes anything else which is still being canvassed that it was of a confidential nature. The Supreme Court has ruled. It looked at the agreement and said it wasn't. So how then do we still latch on to that, if you like, that argument being canvassed still at this point, after that ruling, that it was of a confidential nature? And if indeed the Supreme Court has ruled that it wasn't, why then do we have officials of state not disclosing information as it is contained in an agreement? I have the agreement here and I'll be reading those specific provisions just for clarity purposes.
Yeah, okay. So let me start with the Supreme Court ruling on it, the disclosure. I think, if my memory serves me right, when the ruling was made, it was restricted though, that it should be given to only counsel. Yes, and which is in tandem with best practice elsewhere, where there is the likelihood of the evidence jeopardizing national security. You can restrict it to only counsel. Even elsewhere at the bar, there are special selected lawyers who are giving clearance to see this evidence. So it's not every lawyer who is in. It's not the best. Thank God in Ghana we don't have it. But in Britain, there are certain cases that if the case is of such a very complex national security matter, there are what we call special counsel. So you would have to necessarily engage that class of counsel. It's not every lawyer. So the Supreme Court said they should be given to the counsel. So it means that basically the Supreme Court didn't ask it to be given to the general public. Okay. But apart from that, as we stated, it's not a one-side affair. No, you know, this is society is dynamic. Knowing Ghana, you see, we are very eager to find the truth for ourselves. It was just a matter of time before this would come out. So the larger question is that it looks like we have an issue with freedom of information, basically. Yes, freedom of information. The opposition, when the Attorney General opposed the application to, what do you call it, make available the agreement. Yes, I found it very strange, because as soon as if you had just looked at, I mean, a few jurisdictions, you'd have just seen that no, there was no way they should have opposed. Rather, straight away, they would have just said, we want it restricted to council. So what I'm saying is that both coming from the Supreme Court, the position of the government in the Supreme Court, and to the, let me say, post that, the reaction of the Ghanaian society, you would find that there is a tension between the quest for freedom of information and the quest to protect national security. By no means, that fight is not over. It will continue. You will have more cases of this nature coming in the future, okay? Because elsewhere you see that they started this kind of fight. They are not yet done. There will always be that tension. So what I would say, bottom line is that, yes, we recognize that there are certain issues that may jeopardize national security, okay? But on the other hand, too, the citizenry must be made aware of certain basic facts. So you would see that in this case, I think the government at the time made a mistake by not
communicating exactly what it is.
Yes, it's a communication. You know, but we'll learn from our mistakes. Okay.
Very well. But yes, okay. So the previous government may not have, you know, communicated that. But my concern is why the new government seemingly seems to be towing that line when, you know, you have the president alluding to the fact that, yes, the two-year period is up, when indeed there's nothing like a 2-year period being up in respect of their stay here, because the agreement clearly states that these two people are to be integrated into the Ghanaian society. That's the substance of the agreement. The 2-year period is in relation to the period within which they're to be put under surveillance.
Okay. So,
and Mr. Malibu was talking about some renegotiation, and that renegotiation is in respect of that same surveillance. Okay. After the 2 years, if the circumstances demand, then we will take a look at that.
But you told me there was nothing like that.
No, you were looking at it in terms of their stay. No. Let's distinguish, Mr. Malibu.
It looked like a lie before the
Mr. Malibu, let's distinguish.
There was nothing like that.
Please. Let's distinguish. I'm not eating back my words. Let's just distinguish between the period for surveillance and whether or not they are here indefinitely to stay. They're two distinct things. We just need, we don't need to put them together. So my question is, why should the incoming government hold that line? And again, this agreement was taken to Parliament. Are we saying that parliamentarians didn't look at the content of the agreement?
Oh, well, you see, that's a very complex question you've asked, Nana. What it is that, you see, is because so far you've seen how Ghanaians have reacted. It was such a sensitive political matter with electoral repercussions. So even the previous government, you know, this.
So for electoral fortunes,
exactly. So even for this current government, yes, there's still that issue that if you don't handle it well, voters will punish you for it. I think that is what is looming large in all these discussions. So it's quite a difficult rope to walk. It's quite tight.
Very well. Let me turn to Dr. Jinapo. Let me have you on this. Political expediency versus the people's right to know the truth.
Well, I think this Gitmo 2 issue, it's more or less, it's an issue that when I listen to what is going on, it's more or less a rehash of what happened in 2016.
But with clearer details now?
Well, I wouldn't say with clearer details, in the sense that, in fact, if you remember, this issue came up recently during the president's encounter. As a matter of fact, most people had even forgotten about them. And unless you were somebody who happened to be following the story, you didn't even know that their time was coming to an end. And today, knowing what we know, there are a number of issues that are up. Number one, to find out the sincerity of the MPP administration or the MPP party, as at the time they were making all those accusations against the NDC. If you ask me, in 2016, I think the Gitmo 2 issue had some effect, some high level of effect in terms of the outcome of the election, especially in urban areas. If you quite remember when their pictures were put in the Daily Guide, I mean, most people were kind of scared, and yeah, it's a fact. It's a fact. Most people were kind of scared.
I have to cover my beard.
It's true. Yeah, people were scared. And the narrative that followed was also quite problematic, especially when you had the Minister of Interior say he didn't even know about them, the Minister for Foreign Affairs. So people were kind of, what is going on? You see, the problem that I have now is that I don't think the MPP administration, with the greatest of respect, is being very candid with us as a people. Number one, in 2016, based on the intelligence that they had, did they think that those people were a threat to the people of this country? From what is happening now, it looks as if it's not.
Well, candidate Ekufuado at the time said he was only briefed, but didn't have, the full details.
Was he the president to be?
Well, he didn't have.
No, but I'm just stating the fact as it is.
Yes, but let me finish. He didn't have the full details, but you know very well that the MPP party capitalized on it and built on the fear of Ghanaians. I mean, these are supposed terrorists who were coming in, and the government wasn't that much aware. So, I mean, they capitalized on the emotions of Ghanaians. But what I'm saying is that today the MPP is in government. What is their position relative to these detainees? I hear the Minister of Foreign Affairs says that the government's hands are tied because they are refugees. I disagree with her. You can revoke the refugee status of an individual if it's a threat to your state. Is it not? If it's a threat to your state, if the person is... Yes, that's what I'm saying.
So you need to prove that.
No, but that was... I was building the issue. I was building the case. The case here being built is that these guys are former terrorists. And... No.
They've not... I mean, we didn't have any... Or even tried.
They were low risk, very low.
They were not tried.
They were not, yeah.
But, Abana, that is why I went back to 2016. 2016, when these people were brought in, what was the fear of Ghanaians? The fear of Ghanaians, which I said was capitalized on by then opposition, was that these people are people who were arrested because they were terrorists, even though they were not tried. But bringing them to Ghana with their pictures was going to bring trouble in this country. And even some people made the argument that, look, they could more or less incubate terrorist cells in this country. So there was that fear, and that fear
was unfounded.
Yeah, that fear was even
not necessarily because people had that. Yes.
So that fear was even exacerbated when the Minister for Interior and Minister for Foreign Affairs were not even aware of what was going on. And as I did indicate, the MPP capitalized on it, and there's some evidence that, look, they could have won some votes out of it. Fast track in 2017. The question that I'm posing is, the MPP is 2018. The MPP now is in power. Do they see those guys as a threat to the national security of this country? Do they? If they do think that, look, they are a threat to national security of this country, their refugee status has no effect. It can be revoked.
Exactly.
It can be revoked. So I think the government has to move a step further by telling us, based on the intelligence that they've gathered, based on the information that they have relative to these two individuals, who are they? Are they a threat to the nation? How do they conduct themselves? And should they be integrated into the what? The Ghanaian society? Because the plan, as we are told, was integration into the Ghanaian society. If you are being integrated into the Ghanaian society, there are legal processes.
And one of them is granting them refugee status.
That is it. You grant them a refugee status, and you're going to be a refugee forever. You definitely will have to transition to being a permanent resident or being a citizen. So, is the government, in agreement, and do they have does this process have the blessing of what the MPP administration? That needs to be stated. But I think this whole thing was just it was just a political what do they call it? A political chess game that was being played between the MPP and the NDC. The unfortunate thing is the NDC did not manage it well as at that time. As at now, as to whether they are doing it well, I can't tell. I can't tell in the sense that if the commentary that we are being told is they were even granted passports, Ghanaian passports. Is it true? I don't know how a refugee can be granted a Ghanaian passport, and I haven't heard anybody refute that allegation. Do you get my point? The second thing is that, look, even these guys, when they came in, the whole plan and the whole documentation that, as you said, you have, was that there was a program of 2 years of surveillance. Then after that, there's going to be more or less a refugee status and become integrated into the system. Was it the case? Because that wasn't what we were told. We were told that they were supposed to be here for just 2 years, and based on even people had the understanding that after 2 years we had the option of sending them back or not.
But you see, that's the point I find confusing, or I'm confounded with that, because currently that is the narrative of the government. that yes, the time is up.
Yes.
Making it seem as though even after they've had the benefit of looking at the agreement, if assuming without admitting that before they came in, you didn't have the benefit of the agreement. Now you're in government. You had to take the agreement to Parliament for ratification pursuant to the ruling or judgment of the Supreme Court. So at least you've had some time to look at the agreement. And so if you were under the impression that they were here for 2 years, now you know that no, they are not here for 2 years. They are actually to be integrated here. So when you carry on with the narrative that was started in 2016, in the light of what I'm perceiving to be, I mean, you have fresh facts that say something else. Why are you towing that line of that narrative?
Doesn't it surprise you that the president, during his encounter, when he was asked, he said they are yet to review or to look at the
but
issue.
Let me quote the president. He
Yes.
said
Yes.
that the time, he said their 2 years are up. I think I have it here. He says when he was asked, let me just quickly refer. He says the Gitmo detainees, the period is up.
Yes.
And the period here definitely means
Yes,
2
the
years,
2 years
because you're
is
talking
up.
about
Yeah.
2016 to
Yeah.
2018.
But read further.
A decision has to be made, and
Yes.
that decision is under active examination. We need to be able to say something to Parliament when it resumes, he said. But the fundamental issue is no time is up.
Yeah, but even what is even interesting is the president says that, look, the time is up, a decision has to be made, and that decision has to, and it goes further to say that they are examining whatever it is. But
that isn't the correct, for me, looking at the agreement, that isn't the accurate.
I agree with you. I agree with you. But the interesting aspect is that then later on, the Minister for Foreign Affairs says that, look, when they came in, they couldn't do anything because those guys were given refugee status. So at what point in time was the president informed that these individuals were given refugee status?
Maybe he wasn't well briefed.
He wasn't. Do you understand what I'm saying? As at the time that he was granting the interview, he said, look, they are yet to look at it and make a decision. But here, the Minister of Foreign Affairs said, look, nothing can be done about it because, in effect, even before then, these guys were granted what? Refugee status. I think the NDC as a political party has not done very well in terms of holding the government responsible when it comes to this Gitmo 2 issue. Because there are a number of inconsistencies relative to the statements that is being put up by government. And I think the NDC has a responsibility to, especially when they were the people who signed the agreement, to put the facts out. This whole issue about secrecy and all those things, I mean, the truth of the matter is that there's nothing that is of national security threat to this country when it comes to this. So,
can I just
quickly?
Because exactly the way people are angry.
Yes,
if you show where they live,
the facts
people
would have
harm
come
them.
very well. So as it is now, the security issues are real. Allow Doc to conclude. Please allow Doc to conclude.
What I mean when I say national security threat, the whole issue before, even when this case came out, was that people believe that those guys are dangerous people.
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you get the point? Those guys
point.
are dangerous people. And that was the perspective that was put in the minds of Ghanaians. But what I'm saying is that 2 years down the line, and knowing what we know now, those individuals are not what? Dangerous people by what both sides of the pendulum are saying, because the MPP in opposition, I mean, based on their narrative and their utterances and their commentary, put some kind of fear. But today, as they are in power, they are not even doing anything to repatriate the individuals. Do you get a point? So it looks as if there's nothing, threatening about them. But I think that the NDC has a responsibility to tell us what the true story and to hold the MPP accountable relative to the coming in of, if the MPP believes that these people are dangerous, then they should send them back. Well, they being refugees is not an excuse.
And I move on to Nana with that question. Now, they've been given refugee status. We know that. And we are being told that by virtue of that, a sovereign nation's hands are tied. We cannot do anything about that. Obviously, I mean, clearly, that is not tenable. Why is... I mean, I don't want to ask why, because for me, what I'm seeing is it's just political expediency, if you like, in order not to be seen as shifting the goalposts. Well, this is a convenient way to look at the situation, so then it's like, let's not deal with it. Let's not go stir waters to, you know, perhaps lose favor with the US. So let's just carry on with this narrative and all. Tell us exactly what is the situation.
Well, I cannot tell you exactly what this is. I'm not a government official.
Oh my goodness.
I can only do what everybody else here has done. Obviously taking the side of government for good reason. Just the fact that I'm a supporter is not the reason. The fact that what is being done is what I believe is the way to do it is the reason I support what government has done. And I must establish one. I think that communication must be steady because it's important. I agree that there are people out there who find this very serious and so would like to know what they need to know. In the need to know situation, there are some things that we will not be told. We must all accept that. Let's go back to the history. And by the way, as I listen to all of this, I've been one who hasn't paid extraordinary attention to these arguments. But as I've listened to everybody on the table, it seems to me that we should be clear in our minds about one, the politics of this matter, and two, the sociology. On the sociological matter, none of us here should either pretend to be sociologists or apolitical. Apart from maybe the host.
I am apolitical. Apolitical.
You know what I'm saying?
People
you
are entitled to their opinions as to whether I am or not. But
you don't necessarily have to be partisan.
Yes.
You don't necessarily have to be partisan to be political. Yeah. So, Dr. Jinapo, don't worry. But for me, it's important that, you know, in order for us to learn as a country, because all these sensitivities come from ignorance or otherwise. You either know or you don't know. And those of us who are in the middle, knowing a bit and not knowing
it's even more dangerous.
Yes. So one day, very soon, TV3 and all the other media houses owe it to Ghanaians to deal with the sociological matter. The politics is real. Why? At the time, how was the matter handled? Poorly. It was handled poorly. And therefore, we deserved to take advantage of the political fuel. And we did. And we did so rightfully. There's nothing wrong with what we did.
So that's an admission that you capitalized on that?
I'm saying that, yes, I spoke about it. And I'm saying that everything I said, I will not withdraw. The reality was that, did we know enough about these people? Why was everything done under Sumnasi? Why was everything hidden? I agree with the matter of certain things not being exposed to people. I agree with Abraham on that point. We can't know everything. Why? Even in our own homes, not everything is told to everybody. Yeah, so let's stop. Let's not lie to each other about that. There are certain things we should never know as a totality, the public, because it will bring us chaos. Yeah, exactly. That's what governance is about. That's what good governance should be. But when the matter is exposed, you must glean, you must determine, you must analyze and see, and be able to tell the public what they deserve to know. There are matters where we deserve to know and we need to know, and the ones that we don't really need to know. We deserve to know everything because we are the people.
Very well.
But we don't need to know everything.
But when you decide to let them know, then you might as well come clean. Don't come and...
Exactly. But even coming clean doesn't mean you reveal everything.
Exactly,
but you must state
but just,
what is,
you know,
will satisfy. At that time, is that what happened? The Minister of Foreign Affairs goes to Parliament, where we, the people, are represented. What happened? As far as we saw it, there was no respect. We weren't told enough. Why? The people we appoint or elect to go to Parliament, are they not competent enough to know what to keep within them and what to put out in the public domain? What was there to be afraid of? So all of that activity is a big thing. Then the leading opposition leader, when confronted with this, knowing his experience politically, foreign affairs-wise, governance, all that, what was his response? He said he didn't know enough. He'd just been hinted. And it was barely how many days before the thing blew up and all that. I think just before they came. It was like the day before they came or something, so when he was informed. What was he supposed to do? So, and the rest of us, who knew virtually nothing other than the fear of, and now my beard is under threat, the fear of, you know, we've got the stereotypical images in our minds.
And I even think the images, they may not be true. They are not
Yeah,
true images.
we had all these stereotypical things in our minds. What were we supposed to do?
Yes,
We're supposed to do everything to put fear into the people, to know that this thing, if it's not told to us properly, we must be afraid. I will not change my position on that.
Okay, so fast forward, yes.
Fast forward to
you
our
win
situation
power.
now.
You
Yes.
capitalize on this
Yes,
issue.
I'm emphasizing on that to say that how is it that now we come into office and we don't know that they were given refugee status at the time they were given refugee status? Why? In other words, not a whole lot changed on the communication level as far as government changing hands was
The
concerned.
president was briefed too. So if you say you didn't know, I think put it in context. At the time, as leader of opposition,
he was briefed,
yes.
but
so
to what
he could have
extent?
told those of you
To what extent? To what extent? I mean, when they were now made refugees, when was the new government told? Or how did they find out? Even if they were told, how did they find out? Did they find out of squeezing?
According to the minister, the refugee status. According to the minister.
No, I agree that there are
Mr.
certain. But when you are changing government,
let me help. Let me help with
we
that.
have given them refugee status because these are related matters, and related matters fall within the confidentiality clause that we have
at
talked
what
about.
point
But
does
just a minute.
confidentiality change hands?
Quick
Because it must.
quick
classified.
contribution
I'm saying
here.
at what point does
Nana,
it change hands?
Nana, just a minute.
Until it becomes declassified.
The old government takes it with it and dies.
Divulging information out.
Mr.
No,
Maliba,
we're not
just
talking about the public. I'm
Let
saying from one government
let
to
me
the
help
other.
with this. According to the minister, the refugee status was granted them in July 2016. So, a few months after they had arrived. So, question then is, at the time of briefing,
Exactly
that fact wasn't there because they came in, was it January? Yeah. So by the time they were briefing candidate Nanado, there was nothing like a refugee status then. So it happened subsequently. So they couldn't have briefed him that year, but...
So now, and then let me go back to being the lay person that I am within my politics.
We are talking about today now. That's
Yes.
the question.
Why? If I go back to my lead, do you understand what I'm saying? I'm saying, now, in this instance now, what do I understand? I understand that there have been negotiations based on listening to what the foreign minister. I haven't had a chat with the foreign minister. I haven't heard interviews.
Based on what you've heard in the media.
That's it. There have been negotiations. There's been discussions of one sort or the other. We know that Parliament at a point ratified it. Ratification means the thing happened and then they went back. They went in the forward situation. They had to go back and say, what was the minority doing at the time? Did they not? Were they not part of Parliament? Does the vote say that they said they won't sign? So all of that comes to play. That it means that those who must know what's going on. What is we are the public? Should we be afraid? Like Nana Fredia used to say in 2016 that we should be afraid. Today, should we be afraid?
Exactly, with the benefit of what you know. And that's my question. Why do we seem to be going on with that narrative?
The leadership that I depended on to establish the fear that I publicized, is that same leadership that's telling me there's nothing to fear now. Do you understand what I'm saying? I'm speaking pure. I'm sitting here on my honor telling you that I do not have any extra information. Based on when I look at what is happening now, the minister says now that this is the situation we find ourselves in. She didn't say it sweating. She didn't say it feeling under duress or pressure or anything like that. It gives me the impression that there's nothing to fear now.
Exactly.
But the minister says our hands are tied because they've been given refugee status. That's quite different
that
from...
aspect I consider to be responding to the politics. Do you understand? Yes, that aspect is responding to the politics. Because the politics from Dr. Jinapor, from Abraham, everybody else, even from you, Abner, is that, so why are you keeping us in this situation? That's the politics of it. It's not the sociology, it's the politics. And that one, she's saying that this is why. There's nothing we can do about that.
But that's not true.
Yeah, well, no, I'm talking about the observers from the outside looking in. If they, the sitting government, say that the hands are tied, now, if you like, let's break that down. But let's break that down, noticing that Nana Fredia, for example, I'm only in the political arena. The technicalities of detainee status, refugee, blah, blah, I'm not an expert. Now, what does our hands are tied, technically, what would you glean out of that?
We can't send them back.
You can't send them back,
and that's in sharp contradiction to what the position was when you were in opposition.
But when we were in opposition, did you hear Nana Akufo-Addo say that we will send them back? He never said that. No, he didn't.
But some of the communicators said it.
Yeah,
yes, some of the communicators
I'm saying let's call them in then. What are we going to do?
Yes.
We can't do anything. Well, let's go to those who we should hold responsible. Those we should hold responsible. Hold responsible. Can we hold Nana Akufo-Addo responsible? Because he didn't say that. You know what I'm saying? Now, what does your hands are tied mean? Your hands are tied means, among other things, that within whatever agreements that exist, you can't do anything about it. So if, for example, it has been agreed, and that's the portion you were insisting on.
And that is what I would have loved. Then you would have seen a government coming clean as to the facts as it is. Because if you have the agreement saying, and I'm quoting, the government of Ghana is to take measures to facilitate the integration of Mr. Ben Atif and Mr. Al-Dubi into Ghanaian society. Simpliciter.
So they allow them to get married.
That's what it is. And then the other parts where it's talking about, you know, the 2 years, for instance, let me just quickly, you know, read that you have here that the government of Ghana is to keep in effect these understandings regarding security measures pertaining to Mr. Ben Atif and Mr. Al-Dubi for at least 2 years from the transfer date. Prior to the end of the 2-year term, the government of Ghana and United States are to consult regarding the status of Mr. Ben Atif and Mr. Al-Dubi and the extent to which any or all of the understandings regarding the security measures set forth herein should be continued beyond 2 years. So this is where I was trying to draw the distinction that had to do with the surveillance. But the fact of they being integrated, that has no time bar. That has no.
The renegotiation
it doesn't.
All of it.
They were specific with the security arrangements. That's to be distinguished from the fact of they being...
But Abna, from what you've read, it sounds to me
Mr. Maliba, I'll come to you
when the president tells you that
let him finish.
It's a 2-year thing, that one is established from what you read. It's established.
The 2-year thing has to do with the surveillance.
But it is there.
Whilst they're in Ghana.
It says when the 2-year term comes to an end, you use those words.
Yes, but it's in respect
so there's
of
a 2-year
the surveillance.
Portion. Yeah, but there's a 2-year portion there.
In respect of surveillance.
Yeah,
let's be consistent.
But is that not what the president was talking about? What was he talking about?
Their term is, the period is ended and we need to go back to Parliament to see
what's that surveillance for.
But anyways, you carry on with your...
Yeah, but no, I need to understand too, because you have the document I haven't seen. You know what I'm saying? So for me, it seems that when you say your hands are tied, it takes into consideration a host of things. Some of them we can think about because we're lay people, we think our lay that we might be right. And then some of the things are technical that we don't know about. So when the minister comes out to say our hands are tied on that score, me, I can appreciate that. And I can, at least I know that our fears are laid on the fact that these people could still be considered terrorists or what have you. At the time that they were brought in, one of the questions was, were they terrorists? According to the Americans, their perspective,
they said low risk.
But they were labeled low-risk terrorists. Why do we want Ghanaians to deal with low-risk terrorists? Why should we live with them? Why can't you live with them? Those are the kinds. Today,
Nana, please wrap up for me and I'll take message.
Today,
go for a break.
Are we standing on the same position? For me, we're still going to be sensitive about it. People will try and argue all kinds of things. I mean, the question about sending them back, are they still a threat? That Dr. Jinapo asked. Apparently, Mr. Okujeto Ablako also asked the same thing. For me, it's answered by the fact that the government hasn't put out a red alert type attitude out there. So there's nothing to fear.
Very well.
That's how
that's how you see it.
Yeah, but I think ultimately, honestly, we'll put away a panelist like this and bring a panel of less emotional people who do. No, it's true. Let's be truthful with Ghanaians.
I think it's just you are perhaps emotional.
When I say emotional,
you're speaking for yourself. You're speaking for yourself.
I don't mean it in a bad way. I'm saying that there are some technicalities and things that others will deal with better than some of us here do.
Very well. The Minister for Foreign Affairs is saying she cannot do anything about it because they are refugees.
Refugee status. And we're going to be interrogating that when we come back from the break. But before the break, let me take some messages that have come through quickly. This one says, good morning to you and your panelists. The Constitution says when the President and his vice are not able to perform their duties, the Speaker steps in as the President. The President is out of the country performing his functions as President of the country. Why another President Why should we have another president in the country? This is going to bring about duplication of powers. If that is the case, the speaker should be made to take the oath of acting president on the same day the president and the vice president are being sworn in. Good morning, Abner and your panelists. Article 6011 needs a precise interpretation and the word unable, of the word unable, or better still, amended. But when who assumes as the vice president in absence of the president and vice should be sworn in as well. Derrico and I didn't quite get that, but thanks for sending it through nonetheless. Good morning, Abna. He says, please, I need education from the lawyers. What happens when the president passes on and the vice becomes the president and another person appointed to become vice president? If the new president also passes on and the vice becomes
We'll continue doing
now that. I'm dizzy with your question. I'm just going dizzy.
We'll continue replacing
but anyways, I think we get the inputs. We will address that. Mr. Martin Pebu and Abraham perhaps would assist with that. Now, the Speaker of Parliament should not be sworn in for the second time because I don't think the president upon his return will be sworn in again. I suggest it should be done once on the president and vice president and the Speaker of Parliament in the stipulated 4-year term. Ilyasu inside Boko. I'll take the last one and then we go in for a break. Article 6011 really needs amendments. Other than that, the Chief Justice will continue to be swearing in the standing-in president anytime the president and the vice president are both not in the country, which is a requirement of the Constitution. The Speaker of Parliament should be sworn in once as a standing president, and his position as a president becomes functional anytime the president and vice are not in the country. Anyways, thank you for your messages. We'll take a break. When we come back, we interrogate the status, the refugee status assigned to the Gatemo detainees and what the implications are. Is it truly, does that truly bar the state from any further action regarding their return to wherever they came from? You're watching and listening to New Day Saturday Edition. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're watching and listening to New Day Saturday Edition. We're live on TV3, also live on 3FM 92.7. The panelists are charged up here, ready to go into the next leg of the discussions. But I'll take some messages and then we wrap up on the Gatemo 2 detainees discussion. This one is coming in from Ko Sami Nima. He says, good morning, Abna. Is the Constitution, it's the interpretation of the Supreme Court that is creating this constitutional confusion because Article 6011 is clear as to when the Speaker can be sworn in. I believe the Supreme Court, when they gave the ruling on political, I'm not quite sure what it is. It was just because it was honorable, okay, in contention. Our Supreme Court judges must, he says, live beyond politics. That's your opinion. In the unlikely event where both the president and his vice dies in a strange circumstance, would there be a rerun or the Speaker takes over until the presidency expires? And this is coming in from Ray in La Paz. There's no problem with the ruling of the Supreme Court. The issue is the current situation where our vice president is sick. And that's coming in from William in Tema. Yeah. And Koshi Badohu Ayivo in Anlo Traditional Area says, what would be the sense in a recall of Parliament to swear in the Speaker when the Vice President visits Togo for an hour in the absence of the President? Why do we fight to defend what is wasteful, senseless, and regressive in the name of antiquated due process? Why should we have a slave to the relics of British splendor? Let's think for once. Okay. Good morning, Abna. Please, can someone help me get a lawyer to send this swearing in of Speaker as acting president in the absence of both the president and the vice to the Supreme Court? Okay, so Mr. Pebu and Mr. Maleba, which one of you is going to do this? So why the Speaker should be sworn in more than once as a caretaker or acting president? Can't we make it such that once the Speaker is sworn in, once as acting president, then it becomes automatic for him to act as acting president anytime this occurs? I think this question has been addressed by the panel. Good morning. I'm struggling to get what Nana is trying to say. The Gatemo 2 are already in the system. NPP, what is the way forward? Stop the blame game because NDC is no longer in power. Ghanaians will judge you for what good steps you would take, not what the NDC did. Thank you so much for your messages. We will wrap up on this quickly. Mr. Maleba,
yes.
Wrap up
your
concluding remarks
Nana
on this and we
was making his submissions, he made a point that Nanado then, as he was, never kicked against the bringing in of the Gatemo 2. He said Nanado did not say that. He did not say that he should send them back.
The position wasn't to return them.
Yes.
That was what you said.
Yes. So this is Akumia, Director of Communications, speaking on behalf of the party, and when he made this point that Nana Addo, this is what he said, Communications Director of the New Patriotic Party, Nana Akomia, says the party's flag bearer, Nana Akufo-Addo, would have turned down a request by the U.S. government for Ghana to host 2 former detainees of the Guantanamo Bay in the country. Did Nana distance himself from this statement?
Who, me? Or Akufo-Addo?
Did then Nana Addo distance himself from this?
No.
If this did not reflect what he believes in, you have a communication director of the party putting these words in your mouth. Did he distance himself from it? In fact, Mustafa Hamid, who is his direct spokesperson, made a similar comment on CTFM. But in all this, what intrigues me is Shirley Ayoko-Botchwey. When she was in Parliament, she sounded very much like Hannah Tete. That the 2 Gitmo 2 people did not pose any threat to this country, and that they have even gotten married in Ghana. And I asked myself, are these not the same things that we were telling you?
No, but yours was rather preemptive because that situation hadn't happened. She is looking at it with the benefit of hindsight. They've been here for 2 years. Have they posed a threat to the country? So if she says that,
before then, we also said that there have been some surveillance on these 2 Gitmo 2 people. And our security agencies, together with the U.S. security agency, had done some surveillance on them. And the verdict is that they were low-risk Guantanamo Bay detainees.
Wasn't that a restricted environment, as in, if you like, an environment that was quite controlled, as opposed to they being...
I'm saying that security intelligence had already predicted what she was saying.
Okay.
And we put that out. The MPP still said no. They were a threat to this country. Today, Fast Track, she's also re-echoing what we said. And what did she also say? When President Mahama talked about compassionate ground, and the MPP stoked fire, and we had the Catholic bishop, my own Catholic bishop, the Obuasi man, who said that President Mahama should use common sense or intelligence. What did he even say? Meaning that Mahama lacked intelligence or common sense. That day, when I heard that Catholic priest, I said, look, bishops like Ando, bishops like Derry, bishops like Sapon would say in their minds that he's not a Catholic priest. Fast forward, what is the minister saying, the Foreign Affairs Minister saying? The Foreign Affairs Minister is saying that we cannot return them because there's fighting in Yemen, their home country. Is that not compassion? Are you not protecting them from being killed because there's fighting there? These government people, MPP who speak with 2 tongues must be watched. Must be watched. You are now in power. You are clutching onto straw. Oh, we have given them refugee status. Now I'm told they are giving them a Ghanaian passport. Which of these papers, I'm not going to use document for you to even think that they are high. They are papers. Which of these cannot be withdrawn? And say, go.
Thank you. I need 30 seconds to wrap up and then I move on.
So
we need to move on so quickly. Very well. This thing about their refugee status and the fact that our hands are tied and all.
Yeah, obviously, our hands are not tied in that respect, okay? If the conditions for granting the refugee status cease, so let's say specifically if Yemen improves, if the situation in Yemen improves, it means that they may go back. But you see, look, I think we should just, we are dwelling too much on the political aspect. Look, the truth of the matter is that if these guys really constituted a national security threat, they would have been sent away long ago. So to the extent that they've not been sent, it means that on the ground, it's not, this situation is not as critical, it's not as dangerous as the general populace are commenting. So perhaps we should educate our populace well to trust our national security apparatus, that they are fully in control. You know, national security is not conducted in the open. They won't do that. So they should trust that, look, the system is fairly, firmly in charge of these two gentlemen. And so there should be no panic. There should be no panic. If really they really constituted a threat, I have no doubt that by now they would have been repatriated. Okay, so let's just leave it as it is. Let's keep them. And don't forget, you see, there's the other side that, I mean, as lay people, we don't know. But look, you see, to the extent that we are hosting them, we get to share intelligence with the Americans. And the Americans have a lot of intelligence when it comes to these matters. Look, even the British cherish their relationship with the Americans when it comes to sharing intelligence. Okay, so that is quite a big asset for us. So let's keep them. Let's be in the loop. We also get to know what's happening, because I tell you, there's a famous
we
case.
just hope that we do indeed benefit from such, you know, transactions, because oftentimes we don't necessarily get that. But well, we hope for the best. Dr. Japo, concluding remarks on this.
Well, I think this whole issue, based on what we know today, is a political issue. I mean, it's politics because, in fact, before you are granted refugee status, you apply for it, and there are a number of conditions you need to meet. Mind you, these gentlemen were not coming from Yemen. So when I hear people say that there's war in their country, no, they could have chosen to go anywhere. They were coming from the United States. The last time they were in Yemen, probably about 16 years ago. 16 years ago. So they
from Guantanamo Bay in Cuba, not US necessarily.
No, Guantanamo Bay. And it surprises me that, based on the agreement that you read, I mean, they were supposed to be put under security surveillance for what, 2 years? And
at least.
At least 2 years. They come in January, July, you are granted their refugee status. I don't understand. Why the rush? But I think moving forward, it looks as if the government of the day has agreed that, look, listening to the Minister for Foreign Affairs, that these guys are not threats, and it looks as if government is ready to accept them and to give them a passage in terms of integration. If you listen to what the NDC said when they were in government, it looks as if they said the same thing. But as to whether anybody is going to be punished politically or not, I don't know. But definitely the stance of the MPP in 2016 has changed. There's no doubt about it. But as I indicated, it's for political expedience. You know, and I wouldn't blame them. I listened to my brother. I wouldn't blame them. I would take advantage of, because the NDC have shot itself in the foot. The commentary was so bad and so unprepared and so uncoordinated. And if you are opposition desperate for power, like the time Nana Fredia was, definitely you would have gone after them. And I think the NDC will also have to do the same, because if they are really holding the MPP responsible, I don't think the excuse of these guys being given refugee status is one that can prevent them from. The government must tell us the position. Do they serve as a threat or not?
Very well.
Nana, when were they given refugee status?
July 2016, yeah.
So it isn't the NPP government that gave them refugee
status?
No,
that isn't what he's saying. Nobody said that, yes.
Have I said anybody said that?
Okay, please, your concluding remarks.
Why are people already...
Your concluding remarks.
Now, here's the thing. Look, let's not talk about politics as though it's a Chaskele game we're playing with Ghanaians. At least not on the MPP side. Let's not think that it's all right. And no, it's not. It's serious business of managing people's lives. Let's not talk. We like to do that in this country. It's quite annoying. People, not all of us do politics to trick people. It's not about just do something and win power. It isn't. It is about the realities on the ground. I'm glad now that at least all of us on this table are agreeing with me on my first point, that this thing, the politics is what everybody is dealing with. I didn't agree with you. You did, because your statement was totally political. It had everything to do with the pain of losing an election, the pain of not having been straight with the Ghanaian people, and now recognizing that that's what you should do, which is what the NPP government, all of that is encapsulated in what you did. And so you agree with me, and everybody else has agreed with me that this whole thing now, as we discuss it, the politics has overtaken everything else. That was one of the points I made. The next point, which is also clear, is this matter of what is the status now? In 2016, when the news broke, we were all afraid. We should stop pretending. Even the NDC people. They didn't.
No. Okay.
Well, you know what? Why? When I say all,
Say most.
Say most.
I should say most.
Carry.
Okay, most.
That's a lecturer telling
No,
you.
I'll go most. No, but the point for me is that
You're just playing politics with it.
We need to wrap up on this, so
Well,
please.
did I say anything
30
different?
seconds wrap
I
up for
didn't
me.
say anything different in my previous submission. I said we took advantage of the politics of it. But I'm saying at the time that it happened, it was also a fact that people were very, very uncomfortable with the situation as it broke. Today, are we as uncomfortable? We are not. So everybody, now this matter of surveillance at the time, and Akomia said, what Akomia said was based on the context of before the people entered the country.
Everything is context.
It is different from now. And the things that you did that has put them in the status they are in. Let's stop being dishonest with each other.
Very well. Thank you. We can move on safely now.
But you
to
know
look
that
at
in the 2
You are
years...
being dishonest.
No, please.
That's why you're responding.
We are
again.
done, gentlemen.
You're still uncomfortable.
Gentlemen,
In
please.
the 2 years...
We need to move on
Because
to
you're
the
not being
University of
honest.
Ghana Teaching Hospital thing. It's a very important
invisible
issue.
forces are-
Let's
You're
go
still
on.
uncomfortable
Mr.
with the fact that you were
Nana, that's fine.
dishonest with Ghanaians.
A standoff, ongoing standoff between Government of Ghana and the University of Ghana authorities over the management of a beautiful, in fact, magnificent facility that cost us over 270 million United States dollars. It's been lying idle for some time now, I believe over a year. Why do we find ourselves in this situation? Doc, I would want you to start us off on this one. Did we have to get to this point?
I don't know. And in fact, when I listened to the developments regarding this hospital, I mean, the conceptualization of the idea, how the project was supposed to be executed, and how the project was supposed to be run, it baffles me that there's a bantam, because it looks as if everything is put on paper. Everything is documented. And I would have been very surprised if things were not put on paper, especially if you are looking at an institution like the University of Ghana. I mean, that's supposed to be
Citadel
of agreements. You know, I listened to the Director of Health on radio today, and my understanding is that there's a solution to it under the supervision of His Excellency the President of the Republic. But I was a little bit disappointed when he was asked what is the solution. He couldn't come straight with the solution, and I was even surprised, him being Director of Health, he was not even involved in any kind of negotiation of that sort. In fact, I have a sense that this whole hospital project was supposed to be managed by the university based on the agreement, everything. But the current administration has changed its mind.
Well,
Yes, of
just to
course.
help that,
Yes.
the facts that reported is that there was, in 2012, government signed a contract with Mercer's Engineering Development Consultant, EDC, based in Israel, to build the facility. And the university gave them 400 acres of land to do that. And then following, that agreement, the university, following that, the university set up the University of Ghana Medical Center, right, as the special purpose vehicle that will oversee the operation of the facility. And that was pursuant to an agreement that was signed between the Ministry of Health and the university in 2015, which gave ownership of
So
the
fine.
facility to the
To the
university.
university,
So
yes.
there
It's
was
clear
that
now.
agreement.
There's nothing,
Unless
I mean, there's
something else
documented-
comes to the
yes.
contrary that that
Yeah.
thing does not exist. But otherwise,
as
there
I'm
is.
saying, that every documentation shows that the university was supposed to run it. But the current administration thinks so. I don't have a problem with that. I mean, government, we voted for the MPP government to steer the affairs of this nation. And if they are taking a decision that, look, even though the previous administration said it should be manned by what the university, we think otherwise, I don't have a problem. But you need to state the reasons. You have to tell us, look, this is what it was, this is what we want it to be. And you have to give us convincing what? Reasons. This issue of fighting, I don't think is the right way to go. And I would want this issue to be resolved as quickly as possible.
Right.
Well, we are talking of what? A facility of $270 million.
That's just for the phase one,
And
actually.
it's sitting there idle. If you remember, at a point in time, somewhere under the Mahama administration, there was this banter between Dovlulati and the University of Ghana over what? Access routes. You remember? Where he sent some people to go and pull down the gate. I'm a little bit biased when it comes to this issue because I work in the university community. I think it is regretful and saddening when you find a university in a bantam with government. I mean, it shouldn't happen because the university is supposed to be more or less an autonomous role model institution.
It is actually
autonomous. You understand what I'm saying? So when you have a situation whereby the university cannot come into an agreement with government, then it becomes problematic. And I think for some reason, gradually, government is beginning to, when I say government, I'm not talking of this particular, that's why I started the example of the Vululat's issue. It's beginning to poke its nose into the affairs of what? The university, where naturally the university is supposed to be a place that you can have something called what? Academic freedom.
Right.
If you remember, under the periods of PNDC, when people, there was nothing like that, we had people like Adubu who could what? Who could speak? Because...
Are you sure?
When
he spoke, he ran away.
But you see, the point being made here is that the university should be an area whereby you can get the freedom to at least to think.
Right.
So when I get the opportunity to sit here, I make statements, of course, statements that are not unfounded or statements that more or less, I mean, it's indicative of whom I am, working in the academia. So it's like that when I go back to the university, I cannot be hounded or nothing can happen to them. But when you have a situation of this sort, then it becomes, it becomes a problem. So my call on this administration is that, look, they need to bring finality to this impasse.
Right.
The Ghana Medical Association is calling on the president to intervene. And I think the fight is becoming too prolonged. And when I listen to the university community, I doubt if they are going to cede the supervision of that institution too. If government has a justifiable reason why the university cannot manage it, they have to tell the general public and try to convince us.
Yes. Now, to Mr. Kwebu and then to the two politicians. Right? The question here is, the University of Ghana is, is an autonomous entity and can, get into transactions on its own, acquire properties and all of that. Indeed, the land on which this facility stands is the University of Ghana property, 400 acres, we are told. And there is a basis for the University of Ghana having this position. Aside the fact that yes, it's autonomous, there is this agreement that it's reported that the Ministry of Health signed with the university back in 2015 that the construction, the facility will be constructed and handed over to the university to manage, based on which the university set up the University of Ghana Medical Center to, be the facility managers. And then subsequently we are told that plans of recruiting professionals into the facility and everything were, actually put up, and some activities towards implementing those plans came in. So when we're talking of the subsequent banter or tussle with this current administration, the question then is, if you were, not to put you on the spot, but if you're advising the university, given these facts as you have it, what would be your position? What would you say to them? That really you have a basis to be making this claim that yes, we have to manage because this is what we agreed. Now you seem to come back, well, not government constituted differently is now saying, let's, we are not going to do that. What would be your advice?
So naturally, it would be to say the university should insist on its rights.
Which is what the Vice Chancellor is saying, the former Vice Chancellor.
Exactly, exactly, yes. So, and that's why the tussle is still ongoing. So, but basically, you would see that to the extent that there was such an agreement, no tangible reasons have been advanced why the government, that's the ministry, sought to resile from the agreement. Yes, so far, at least no tangible reasons. Yes, you would know, being a lawyer, you are well aware that there are grounds for terminating an agreement. Even if an agreement doesn't make provision for a termination clause, you can still terminate it, depending on what happens. Okay. Yes, so far, as I stated earlier, the point is that to the extent that the ministry has not advanced any reasons, any bad reasons, showing that handing over the facility to the university would harm the nation Ghana, it means that they should adhere to their contractual obligation. They signed up to it, so they should adhere to it. You say it? Yes, because it will be difficult that you sign an agreement and then tomorrow you just turn around and say, oh, no, I'm resiling from it. No, in the absence of tangible reasons. That's my take on it.
Very well. Now, Mr. Maliba, that means that there are those who are arguing that perhaps the reason for this tussle now is that there's a certain expectation that this facility will be profitable, and so people, government is seeking to get in there and, take advantage of all of that. But does that really take away the fact that there was an agreement, or does that justify any decision or any quest to resolve from that agreement that gave, the University of Ghana authorities the expectation that following the construction of this facility, we are going to manage it? We are autonomous after all.
I think there's a certain mindset on the part of the managers of this country now, those who have just taken over, who think that whatever they have come to meet, and if it is something they inherited from the NDC government, they must do anew. They must do anew. And that is the mindset. They simply cannot understand that governance is a continuum. And for that matter, if you came and met a process ongoing, which is there have been adverts, people have applied, and that they were in the process of recruiting people to start the first phase, continue from there. They simply do not understand that. And look, we are talking about University of Ghana Hospital. Do you know there's a Bank of Ghana Hospital which is also locked up? Newly constructed under the NDC. It's locked up. And yet, and you see, for this facility, it is one of its kind. It is they call it the quaternary hospital. I think there's tertiary and there's quaternary too. This is the first, exactly. This is the first time we're having a quaternary. Who knows? Maybe this Baumia stress, which has now metamorphosed into something, could have been dealt with at that place.
Has it metamorphosed into something?
I don't know. I don't know.
So why did you say
I don't know.
that?
I'm saying that we are being told it is something else.
Nobody
so,
is saying that.
Okay, it's still stress.
Yes.
But this stress, maybe this quaternary could have dealt with it. If the tertiaries cannot deal with Baumia stress, this one, the quaternary, could have done it. Now, you are saying that, and I heard the Deputy Minister of Health say that it is a 10 key project, meaning that it is not completed yet. But do we have people who have moved into their homes when the home is not completed, but they are still living there and building other parts or not? Could we have put the first phase into use? Dissipation of
the equipment installed.
The equipment. And there's electricity running, there's air conditioning running, and you lock it just because you cannot come to terms that because the previous government has started this, let's continue with it. And so this is the kind of government we voted for. We have to live with it.
No, quickly on this, and then we go into we tie this into
and it wasn't a bad decision by the people of Ghana. When 1 million people together with everybody else joined forces to sack the NDC from office. Now, and that's what it is, Abraham. You guys were sacked for your failings. Now the issue on the table, as I understand it, and I don't, but he wasn't sacked.
Please, let's focus.
You were sacked, and
let's focus.
UG from the pain.
Teaching hospital is on the table now. That's what we're looking at.
I honestly and truly haven't gathered enough information. Today I'm not very well equipped with information.
Ready for this program.
I agree with you. I agree with you that a lot has happened. But in the scope that I have, in the small information that I've gathered, obviously, Abraham, you've agreed with me on a few points.
Oh, no, I've never agreed.
So it means that even with my small information, you and I are on the same level.
I agree with you.
On this particular matter, really, what is the issue? Because I'm reading that Mr. Rojo Metal-Nunu, from the script that I've read, the report that I've read, basically is saying that government should be running the affairs of the hospital on a certain level. Is that what this government is also saying? When you read what Mr. Rojo Metal-Nunu, Deputy Health Minister in the NDC government, says that amongst other, and this is from the CTFM portal, says that the government is supposed to, in fact, they had started recruiting. It wasn't the university.
No, you didn't get it right.
That's what it says. It says that
there's a board. There's a board.
Special
it was the UGMC that started.
The board is under the UG District Council.
Right.
So that's the university.
But they were involved in it. The government was involved in it. He goes ahead to tell you the kinds of things that government, and he even suggests.
But government will be paying salaries and all. There's that discussion.
Yes, so I'm saying, when you contextualize that, is that what this government is arguing for now? I don't know. I'm asking because I haven't, seen that. There's no, there isn't a total definition of what the government's position is now. I haven't read it. Which is
what makes the situation even bizarre, because then why don't we carry on
if it hasn't completed its responsibility, it might probably be arguing that. But I've also heard that the minister has said, I read it, that the minister has said that he's putting it to cabinet, and when cabinet comes up with a position, we'll hear from government finally on this matter. So in the interim, again, is the emotional reactions to all of this. Why is government interested in managing a hospital? Blah, 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 and all that. I think they're all fair questions that should be asked, and when we get the details. But ultimately, if we're going to benefit from this facility, and we can benefit from it immediately, it should be resolved immediately. It should be resolved immediately. I don't find this
for a long time.
Yeah, I don't find this an attractive.
Tell your cousin the president.
And to think that this facility cost us so much and is depriving citizens.
I believe that
the very much needed healthcare.
So I think
we need to take a break. But Dr. Janko, you want to come in quickly and then we go for a break.
You see, Abraham, you think that
gentlemen, please, please, let's carry on. Doc is
done the way you do.
No, thank you very much. Thank you.
You can just call the president.
Please go on. No, Dr. Janko is on the floor. Please allow him.
No, I think the line or the public utterance by some government officials, and I'll make mention of the Deputy Minister for Health, on this issue has not been that welcoming. First of all, he talks about the project not being complete, and as a result, that's why they've not been able to move in. Then, again, he talks about management of the hospital, where he even accuses the former vice chancellor as well as others registering the project under their name. Look, there's nothing wrong with government running a hospital of that sort. I mean, most of the hospitals in this country are run by government. But as I said, government will have to come out clear and tell the public, look, because of A, B, C, D. After all, it's government that pays salaries of workers at the university. My salary is paid by government. So if government wants to be involved and tries to bypass an existing agreement or statute, then you need to be very clear and to convince the public. It needs to be well grounded. It needs to be well grounded. So I think this tussle and back and forth is not good, and it doesn't help the image of government itself.
Very well. We need to take a break at this point. When we come back, we move on straight to the issue about the Vice President's health, which Mr. Amaliba sought to bring in his submission, because he tried to make that relation, but obviously there is some connection to be made there. So we'll look at that when we come back. You're watching and listening to New Day Saturday edition. We'll be right back. Welcome back. This is New Day Saturday edition. We are live on TV3, also live on 3FM 92.7, and online we are on our Facebook page, TV3 Ghana, and also on 3news.com. We will be moving on to our last topic for today, which is the Vice President's health and how much details should the public know. Last week, we heard, I believe, yes, on Saturday, that was when the press release was issued by the President, the Office of the President, and we were informed that the Vice President had to leave the country during the late hours of Friday to the UK on a medical leave, and of course it was on the advice of his doctors. And we're looking at the situation now. Following that release or that development, there have been speculations as to what he's suffering from, whether or not there should be full disclosure of exactly what the situation is, and many other things. But of course, this isn't the first time we've been confronted with such a situation. Of course, when it happened to Professor Mills, there were the majority now who were minority back then also asked same questions, but very little also was provided. So we're looking at a situation where what is the people, or what are the people to be, are they entitled to, as it were? We will be looking at that. We do appreciate that these issues of medical, health or medical health or information or details about people are to be kept confidential. But the people also want to know how the elected officials are doing. Question is, how far should the people go, or how far should we go with information? Doc.
Well, I think this issue, as you said, this is not the first time that we've encountered it, and it's not going to be the last. So far as we are human beings, definitely we'll forsake. And we are not talking of just ordinary human beings. We are talking of the president and what? The vice president. What does the law say when it comes to disclosure of what? The health status of what? Of people in that position. I don't know what the law says, but...
We don't necessarily have anything specifically like that to say. You can't disclose it, yes.
You cannot. Yes. So if you cannot, then that's what the law says. It means you cannot. You get what I'm saying? If you are telling me that you cannot disclose the medical details of the president, then...
It's made life very difficult for Abraham.
Then what it means is that you cannot.
But is it the case that categorically we cannot?
Yes.
Okay.
So
we have,
except for the fact that the politics.
Exactly.
We have three lawyers. So if you cannot, then there shouldn't be the call by anybody that the health records of what.
But then there's also best standards elsewhere that we always.
But you see, the fact of the matter is that in the case of Professor Mills, let me start from there. When Professor Mills was sick and he went out of the country, his treatment was being borne by me, the taxpayer. The taxpayer. So I think it is morally right and justifiable for me to know what is wrong with him and how much I'm paying for. Today, as it stands now, the vice president is out of the country. From the commentary that we are hearing from close associates, and I'll make perspective reference to Mr. Gabriel Chidako, that the vice president is in a rented apartment, moderate apartment in UK, and he's receiving what? He's taking a rest. I think if it is said, as you did indicate, that look, the medical records of people in that position should not be made public, then there should be a cessation on the call for, to know what is wrong with the vice president or the previous president. But I think it is also right for us as a nation, if the vice president is not around. Initially, we were told that he was not feeling well. Then the news came that he was sent out of the country. Now we are told that he's taking sick leave. There are too many conflicting reasons, and I think that is a little bit confusing. And even as it's proper for you not to tell us what is wrong with the vice president, but we need to have a time frame as to when he's coming back. His Excellency the President is out of the country for 5 days. If the vice president was around, this whole discussion that we had in the first place related to the swearing in wouldn't have happened. You get what I'm saying? So I think government owes us a responsibility to give us at least the status of the health of the vice president. Where is he? Is he in a hospital? Is he in a rented apartment? Who is paying for it? We have a foreign mission in the UK. Don't we have a foreign mission in the UK? Why is he not staying at the ambassador's place or whatever it is? Do you understand? How much does it? No, I agree. How much does it? No, but I think some of these things, the security issues and those. But I think we Ghanaians naturally fight over things that we should not fight over, because this whole issue about the vice president health, even I quite remember there was a paper that Bruce Derry is preparing to take. I think we need to be serious, and I think the seriousness of it needs to start from those in power. I would have expected somebody in authority to just organize a very brief press conference. Give not too much details, but at least
Let me move on. I've just been told that I have 6 minutes more to go. So quickly, Mr. Abraham, about your take on this. So we've experienced it on both sides. Call for disclosure here, call for disclosure there, none given or not much given. What should be the consensus moving forward?
I think that the logic put forward by Dr. Jinapo when he said that in Professor Mills' case, taxpayers' monies were used. I also think that in this one, taxpayers' money are being used.
He did say that.
Even if he's in a rented apartment, I'm sure it's the taxpayer who's paying for it. So we need to know what is happening to our vice president. Since when did we know that medical reports are not supposed to be shown or to be made public? Didn't we know that during Professor Mills' time? And where were the opposition at the time? They kept saying that let's put that out. Today, fast track. I heard the majority leader say that, pontificating, saying, oh no, you cannot do that because where was he at that time? I think that, look, it appears the MPP does not know that there are principles, and when you stand by something, you should continue with it.
But the same could be said of the NDC, because back then, when the NPP was demanding disclosure,
but you see, you know what?
He said the same thing. That's why my premise to your question was, we've experienced both sides. So what's the consensus?
You see, never in my few years on F have I ever seen, have I ever seen the law of karma working so perfectly, but for this administration. You said Gitmotu, you send them away. You are now there, you can't send them away. You said we should disclose. So if disclosure was good of the health status of our presidents, you now have it. So you should lead the way. And then we'll see that, yes, you have done it. In the next 4 years, when we come, we'll also follow the lead. But you have a fine opportunity now to say that, look, we started saying that, let's show. So now that we have indicated that the vice president is sick, we'll show the details. But you see, when they are on the other side, they speak this way. And for me, let me move to Nana quickly. Nana, you have your quickly go, and then yes.
And they'll tell me that I'm the one.
Disclosure. How much disclosure should there be?
It's my party doesn't come. In the first instance, this whole thing that has happened, in the manner that has happened, causing us to talk about it today is good. What is that? That is the fact that information was put out. Prior to this, when information was put out, it was put out because those in office refused to put it out. The NDC, they refused to put out information.
Why? We didn't say that he was sick?
They refused to.
Mr. Melba, please, we don't have much time.
No interjections. He doesn't want me to talk because he's afraid.
He's telling lies.
Now, so in this context, this communication was good. Ghanaians were informed what the status of
Vice President.
The Vice President was. And we've still been told, that his situation is such that he needs to rest. That is the state of affairs. What other detail is Dr. Jinapo?
Who's picking up the bill? And what
so what details do you need to know again? What is it pertaining that you need to know?
Those are the
pertaining,
details.
It can be English. What detail do you need to know, such that you want a whole press conference called on it? Meanwhile, we've been told what has happened to him. So it's crucial.
For how long is he going to be out of office, for instance?
Well, the doctors will be looking at that, and they'll tell us. Yes, why not? Why? In the first instance, they told us that he needs to rest. So obviously, rest is key. They'll be monitoring him, and they'll tell us all that. I understand. I mean, what's wrong with that? Now, here's the reality. The reality is that the failings of others is making them jittery. They failed to tell us when it wasn't MPP people who put out Professor Milsting. It was Mr. Spiogabra who put it out first.
So moving forward, do you believe that we should have disclosures?
In the week before Professor Mills passed away,
Nana, quickly before I move to Mr.
They didn't tell us the truth.
You think moving forward we should have disclosures? We should continue.
Passing away is not limited to one
to a certain point.
You be talking about passing away.
Mr. Maliba, please.
Passing away doesn't happen.
Mr. Maliba, restrain yourself. Please, exercise restraint. Exercise restraint. We disclose. Very well. Quickly, Martin.
Passing away. It will reach you.
Please allow him, Mr. Quickly. We have under 1 minute to do this, please.
It will reach you.
Oh no, gentlemen, please be fair to him. Please be fair to your co-panelist. He hasn't. Please, yes, carry on.
Briefly, first of all, I have to say that we wish the Vice President a speedy recovery.
Thank you.
Yes, we pray with him, that he recovers and then he comes back quickly. Yeah, so basically, yes, you see, just following from what all the panelists have stated so far, yes, legally, you cannot disclose, but politically, you know, there's a quest to know. So you took a middle line where you give out some. And that's what we are doing. So with time, the practice will
be fine-tuned.
Exactly.
And then we know
yes.
the sum. What constitutes the sum? Which parts are we leaving out? And all those things. Yes.
Exactly. That's the thing. So if, I mean, as I said, we just wish him a speedy recovery. And also, one last comment. I understand my JHS teacher is watching. Mr.
Okay.
Good morning.
All right. Very well. But we were bringing the conversation to a close. We say a big thank you to viewers and listeners out there. And also thank you to the panelists, Mr. Martin Pebu, Mr. Abraham Amaliba, Dr. Ahmed Jinapo, and Nana Fedra Ajman Okoyata. Thank you very much, gentlemen. We'll see you here same time next week. Have a good weekend.